Hello again, everybody. This is John Norris at Trading Perspectives. As always, we have our good friends, Courtney Trust and Sam Clement. Y'all say hello.
How's it going?
Hey, I'm doing fantastically. Thank you so much for asking. You know, guys, yesterday I made a presentation to a group here in town, and during the question and answer session, believe it or not, I got 2 or 3 questions about the infrastructure bill that was passed last year. It seems that we were all hot and heavy about it last year, and then we really haven't heard much of it since, for all intents and purposes. I think the president signed it into law in November, and the Senate had passed it in July, and lots of working behind the closed doors type stuff, and now here we are in 2022, and where is it going?
I mean, that seems to kind of always be how it is. It's all rushed, and everyone's pushing for it to get done, and the market's impacted by it. You know, the market rallies when there's good news on it last year, and it sells off when there's bad news, and then it passes, and then
there's no accountability.
Yeah, nothing seems to have really happened. I still have the potholes on my road.
And with that, thank you all so much for listening. No, but in all seriousness, questioner was asking me whether or not it'd be good for the economy, and I said, of course it's going to be good for the economy. I said, so it's legitimate fiscal policy and expenditures, and when the government's buying a bunch of rebar and steel and buying a bunch of concrete and asphalt and crushed rock, I mean, you know, that money's purchasing stuff. There's a multiplier effect to it, so more money in the economy doing stuff like that is much better than less of it. So I said, it's going to be very good for the economy if and when we ever get started doing this type of stuff. Just the sheer expenditure and the amount of jobs that will be necessary to do some of the stuff that they said that they're going to do. I said, however, on the flip side of that, it kind of burns my biscuits. That's using a southern term, that here all this money, Sam and Courtney, that we have been spending for years to fix the roads, to fix the bridges, to repair the levees in lower Louisiana, to do all this stuff. And now here we are, it seems like at the 11th hour, with bridges crumbling like they did
in Pennsylvania.
And here.
And potholes all throughout our streets. All of a sudden, the government's got to come up with borrow $1.2 trillion. It's just, like I said, as a citizen, I said, as an economist, I applaud it. As a citizen, I'm going, what in the world is going on? Where has the government been all these years, and why has it gotten to this point?
Well, John, I mean, before we get into all of that, can you give just kind of a breakdown of the $1.2 trillion and what that is supposed to do for us?
Sam, I think Courtney is looking at the sheet of paper that's on the table right in front of me. Like, Courtney,
what are you talking about?
Interestingly enough, according to CNBC, Courtney, the plan includes some $506 billion for roads, bridges, and major infrastructure projects, including $4 billion for electric vehicles. Sam, your thoughts?
Fair enough, I guess.
$72 billion for water systems, $65 billion for broadband, $56 billion for airports, $46 billion for passenger and freight rail systems, $22 billion for ports and waterways, another $22 billion for water storage, $21 billion for safety efforts.
Okay.
All right.
and then another $20 billion to finance the debt service on the amount of money that we're going to have to borrow. So,
and is appropriations, is that the committee that will determine who gets some of this money?
Well, listen, I mean, that's where the sausage is really going to be made, exactly how it all gets doled out, and who the highest bidder is or the lowest bidder on all these things, and whose brother-in-law has the biggest envelope carrying the most $100 bills.
So you're saying I could get a little of the money for safety efforts?
Yeah.
If I know the right people.
So that is how the money's going to go. And the truth is, I maybe people listening to this live in a section of the country where all the roads are in perfect shape and you don't kind of hold your breath a little bit when you go over certain bridges. But, you know, there's sections of this state at least, and in other states where I've driven throughout the Southeast where, you know, the interstate system's not quite what it used to be in a lot of ways.
I think it's almost to the point where you can say it's not impressive anymore. I mean, for the global leader that we are in so many areas, for us to have such a crumbling infrastructure in a lot of areas, and for us to basically just print all this money to go out and spend, for us to not be making any progress, and it seems like this is not a new issue. It seems like a massive failure.
You know, it's interesting that y'all say that, because I actually feel like, yes, maybe my local road has some potholes that aren't fixed as timely as I'd like. But I think central Alabama, we've been very fortunate to have ALDOT, which is, obviously the Department of Transportation, focus on our downtown roads. And yes, it seemed like it took forever, but it looks so beautiful, and I love the lights underneath it. I mean, I think about some of 280 and other areas that are locally that I feel like I am proud of what I can see in the infrastructure, and it is new and shiny to me. So I know I'm speaking only for myself, but y'all are acting as if we don't have, and there is money, and they have put it in our local area that we see every day.
Well, I will tell you this, Courtney. In redoing the I-2059 through downtown Birmingham, it is an impressive improvement. It truly is. I love riding on that road, and the LED lights underneath it that make it shine pretty colors at night, that's pretty cool too. I'm not going to debate that. However, that stretch of road had not been touched since the 70s. I mean, for all intents and purposes, and it was in crappy shape before we repaired it. We used to be something called Malfunction Junction down there because the massive amount of concrete that was laid years and decades ago led to numerous traffic accidents. So I'd say that very much of a huge improvement there. But I tell you, once you get past, I forget which street it is, but no, let's say you get to, not all the way out to Tarrant. Let's just say the airport.
Yeah.
When you get out to the airport, you get past the airport. It's Tallapoosa Street I was looking for. Once you get past there, the road turns into garbage again, and then you're driving up 59 up through Trussville, and the road's horrible, and then it's nice, and then it's horrible again, and it's just it's inconsistent. It seems like when you get around our major population centers, to be sure, the roads are in pretty decent shape, and the engineering that they've done over in Atlanta is very impressive, because there are a lot of people with a lot of brain power and a lot of money that have figured out a way to dump thousands of cars onto a very small piece of land all at the same time, creating massive traffic jams. Sam, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've been in that traffic quite a lot, and it's awful. But even beyond just fixing potholes, I mean, the public transit systems are pretty awful across the country. I mean, the rail systems that we have are so inadequate compared to what other countries are doing. Why are we, especially for how big of a country we are, it seems like there'd be a lot of value add for a lot of these projects, and it seems like we just continue to have money for it, and then it seems like nothing's really I mean, this is a lot of money that we're talking about. I feel like you should be seeing some rapid improvement in a lot of areas, and not just paving over the potholes again. I'm talking about actually things that are a value add, and not just fixing what's been broken for the last 40 years. And that seems to be where we're not seeing a lot of progress. And it seems to me that is not a new issue, and that is a constant issue with government programs.
Well, the thing is, a good infrastructure is horribly important. And here we are as Americans, and I'm complaining about the grooves in the road around Trussville, Alabama on I-59 compared to people that live in places like Congo. The Democratic Republic of the Congo, where they don't have roads outside of Kinshasa, that type of stuff. We're very blessed to have these problems here in the country where I complain about the grooves in the road. However, it is important to have a good, well-functioning infrastructure because it facilitates commerce, and anything that facilitates commerce is ultimately going to be good for society. So the better the roads are, the better the port systems, the better the airports are. It's just overall it's going to be better for the average American because it just speeds things up. Now, I was kind of disappointed when hey, that's a lot of money on roads, but we're only really doing $22 billion for ports and waterways.
Which is the biggest pain.
That's the biggest pain point that we have right now, as we saw, Courtney, last year out in primarily Long Beach and Los Angeles, just how inefficient our ports were out there. I think we need to be focusing a lot on our airports, our air travel, as well as our ports and waterways, as well as working on fixing the potholes, and need to be asking ourselves as citizens, where is that gas tax going if we have to borrow money in order to just make some basic repairs on the road?
But I thought also when we talk about our infrastructure and the vulnerability of specifically the United States coming, if someone were to attack us, like where are we most vulnerable? And I thought part of that was also infrastructure in the standpoint of like how we get our utilities. So when it looks at the power grid and, water and gas, like how is, that, I mean, that hasn't been updated either. And, you look at that, I mean, is that part of this bill as well?
But there is money towards a lot of these programs already, and there has been money towards a lot of these programs. I mean, a lot of the areas in the country, I mean, people think of Flint, Michigan, but there's lots of areas with crumbling infrastructure beyond just roads and rails and airports. And there has been
Water
money.
treatment facilities.
Yeah, there is money already allocated towards a lot of these programs, and there still isn't a fix for them.
Do you
That's
think part
the
of that is
issue.
like, are there not people to do the work? I mean, is it still a labor shortage, or?
I think it's a longer term trend of government ineptitude. I mean, it's never a lack of money, or almost never a lack of money, why problems aren't getting fixed.
Well, I would say, I mean, the situation in Flint is a little unique. There's a bad, inefficient government up there. I'm not going to debate that. But in a lot of our nation's former industrial cities, we've seen an enormous exodus of the population, which leaves us in a situation. We see it even here in Birmingham, as our core city has shrunk from about 350,000 at its peak down to about 200,000 today, where you have massive swaths of the city that no longer need the infrastructure, or to the same degree. I mean, you build out infrastructure for a 350,000 person city, and now only 200,000 in it. Something's going to get left behind. So that's what we're currently seeing. But Sam is right. There is the problem with U.S. government has never been the lack of money. I mean, our government in all its many forms generates more revenue than the entire economy of Japan. So, that's a ton of money out there in government coffers. It's just, where does it get spent and how does it get spent? And that's a huge part of the problem. Our government has become very huge, and the bigger things get, and it's not just the public sector, the bigger things get, the more inefficient they become. And for the private sector, Sam, I mean, I would say General Motors was a perfect example of that. You know, General Motors, before it went bankrupt and all that stuff, was so monolithic that it took years to get new cars out. Had to deal with unions, and then you had different departments fighting with one another.
All the red tape.
And all the red tape. So there's a ton of friction on new ideas in General Motors. There's a ton of friction. The larger anything gets, in particular government, the larger it gets, the more inefficient it will go, because there's that friction in between areas. And a dollar in means 50 cents coming back out, because there's just, if everyone's got to get their little piece of it.
So how does the private sector fit into this? Because, we joked about it before, but, there's been Domino's commercials about how if there's a pothole in it.
Rod Stewart paving the road in front of his house.
And Joe Jorgensen's screaming for, how Domino's is fixing more potholes than a lot of municipalities are. And it seems like when you take out the need for a profit, it takes out a lot of the drive, and it takes out a lot of the efficiency and the timeliness of things, and we're clearly all believers of the free market, and it takes that part out of it when you just use a government contractor.
Well, I would tell you, a perfect case in point, I live in the city of Mountain Brook, but I have to cross into the city of Birmingham routinely, just part of it. Now, this one little stretch of road on Birmingham, it's on Groover Drive, has had a persistent problem with potholes ever since I was a kid. And it's just, they never completely repave the street. They just come in and they throw some asphalt, some concrete, whatever material they're using at any given time, put it into the exact same holes, and for whatever reason, it
creates other weak spots
and all that stuff. But it's never fixing it. And you go, well, why don't they just come fix this road? Well, City of Birmingham has limited resources for such things, and it's not a major import. How many people live on that street? 20? It's only 20 votes.
They're just triaging everything.
That's it. And so I would tell you, kind of going back to your question, Domino's fixes a lot of potholes because obviously it's good for their business. They don't want their drivers, claiming a bunch of problems. And the better the roads, the quicker their drivers can get there and back and forth and all that good stuff. However, Domino's itself doesn't have the ability to pave an interstate highway system.
But what about a private company?
Yeah, but the money's got to come from somewhere.
Sure.
But you're right. So, that's why you see some private toll roads, and
they're some of the best roads. When I drove from here to Colorado, and there was a lot of these private toll roads, and they are awesome. They're perfectly maintained. There's restaurants kind of in the middle between them. I mean, it's something you don't see on any sort of public road system, and it was well worth the money spent on it.
So if you go, like, I've never traveled on, I mean, the only toll road I've ever done is, like, going to the beach.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that at some point the toll itself sunsets, or is it going to be continual because it's maintaining the infrastructure?
It's crazy because sometimes a public entity will sell its roads to a private company and they become toll roads.
To maintain them.
That is in perpetuity. Now, some of the, like the Cross Bay Bridge that you're talking about, I don't believe that was ever sold to the public as being a permanent toll road. You know, we're going to have tolls on this in order to pay for the bridge itself, but that money stream works out pretty nicely.
Yeah, once you have a revenue stream, it's hard to...
kind of difficult to get rid of it. You know, we go to the beach in Hilton Head, and in Hilton Head they built what they call the Cross Island Expressway. And they said that I think that was just going to pay for them. If that bridge isn't paid for by this point, I mean, you know, I don't know what's going on. But I mean, it's a decent source of revenue. So it's be very difficult to while private roads, those tolls are permanent. Public roads, those tolls are supposed to be temporary, but they end up being permanent in practice.
Yeah,
that's been my experience.
I think so. I mean, like we said, it's kind of hard once you get used to a revenue stream to say, we're going to get rid of this now.
But isn't that part of what our taxes pay for, right?
One would think, Courtney. One would think. But, you know, that's going back to the guy, the people at the luncheon where I spoke yesterday, going back to the infrastructure package. Once this money starts going out, once we start fixing roads, filling the proverbial potholes, repairing bridges, and all that good stuff, it's ultimately going to have a positive effect. It's a short-term sort of consumption by the government will boost the GDP equation. And, oh, by the way, you know, if they do it correctly and in the right spots, it'll rejuvenate some sections of town. I would say that going to the downtown Birmingham's far more appealing with the improvements that they've made in that road. And you've seen what's happened with the public expenditure with the Protective Life Stadium, and you know you have a Topgolf down there and what have you. So sometimes it's, you know, the government spending money and borrowing money to do these types of things, which we thought we were funding already, can have a positive impact on it. But you know, when you start taking a look at $1.2 trillion. And you start taking a look at some crumbling infrastructure and port inefficiencies, and why New York's airports are so lousy, you know, that sort of thing. You really start to have to question where has the efficiency gone? Sam, your thoughts?
I don't think it was ever there. I don't think it's a question of where did
and
it go.
even like Miami, I mean, there's just certain airports that you know are just kind of ugh. You know, when you go to it. And we have a nice airport here that I'm thankful for. It took us a long time to get there, but...
It took us a real long time to get there.
It did, but it's so nice.
It also helps when you're not a major airport on having a nice airport.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, LaGuardia is never going to be clean.
When it's left or right to the terminals and not...
You're having to get on a train.
Yeah.
So one of the things, I mean, and we're running up against it right now, is when taking a look for the $22 billion for ports and waterways, that is one of the things that I wish our state would find a little bit of money somewhere in order to really massively expand our port down in Mobile, because you know it's not ever going to be Long Beach or Los Angeles. I'm not sure we would want that. I mean, just in the amount of traffic in the Bay, which is a nice place and people vacation and all that stuff. However, we should be able to get some market share.
Take a little of Savannah and
just
Charleston.
Take a little bit, and really, I mean, just I think maybe more importers on the East Coast will say, okay, I'm going to pay to go through the canal, you know, as opposed to just say I'm going to ship it across the country in a truck. So that's what I would like to say. But you know, wishes were fishes, we'd all have a fry, I think.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, you like that, do you?
Yeah. Fancy.
So, guys,
first time I've heard that one.
You never heard that
No,
one?
I've never.
How about if
and buts
if
or
we're
candy
and nuts, we'd all have a Merry
Christmas.
Yeah, you never heard of? Okay. All right. Well, I'm a little bit older than you are. Just a few years.
Just a few years.
All right, guys. We always love to hear from you. So if you have any questions or comments, please, by all means, let us know. You can always drop us a line at tradingperspectives@oakworth.com, or you can leave us a review on the podcast outlet of your choice. Of course, if you always want to read more, hear more of what we have to say or how we think, please, by all means, go to oakworth.com and take a look underneath the Thought Leadership tab for all kinds of exciting information. Guys, y'all have anything else on this topic today?
That's it.
That's all I got.
That's all I've got today, too. Y'all take care.